I think we're gonna have a polygamous gravesite. It's gonna be like
Oh my
three
God.
stacked on top.
And all the kids are like, I don't want to be buried near them. I don't want to go visit him when you die. I'm never going to your gravesite. So it's like a big issue for this family right now. Thank God it's not our
just get
family.
cremated and you avoid the whole thing.
Right.
Okay.
Then everybody could have a little bit of you. Hey guys, welcome back to the Push Podcast. I'm Janelle Copeland.
And I'm Edward Copeland. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's good. It's good to see you. Oh, you're in purple. I didn't even notice.
No, this is periwinkle.
Who knows that?
So for those of you that want to know, this sweatshirt is a Lululemon dupe. That means that's like the cool way of saying knockoff. And I found it at Costco the other day for $13. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I think these scuba sweatshirts, I have them in every color from Lulu. I'm embarrassed to say I think they're like $118 or something like that. Something ridiculous. Everything at Lulu is like $118.
Right.
Anyways, this was $13 at Costco. I posted on my stories. Everyone was like, where? What Costco? What colors did they have? And so then they started sending me pictures and so here we go.
That they got it?
Yeah. And then I shared my favorite leggings, and they're Lululemon dupes also.
Mm-hmm. At Costco?
No, they're from Amazon.
Oh, okay.
And I will never buy any leggings other than these. So I'll put them in the show notes. Anyways.
Wait, can we just say, does Costco know that they have dupes?
Yeah.
They're aware?
Okay. I mean, they sell them, they make them.
Right.
Yeah. So listen, today we're going to dive right into this topic because I think it's a big one. Agreeing to disagree. What does that mean? And why are we talking about that? We're talking about it in today's day and age because we have an upcoming presidential election.
Yeah.
And right now, I think I was listening to something on Apple News the other day and they were saying like, our democracy is like in jeopardy because you're just like so stuck in what you believe in and there's no room for debate, healthy discussion. There's no room to try on alternate perspectives. So we're not going to talk about politics in this conversation because it's not a political podcast.
Right.
But I do think it's important that we talk about trying on different perspectives in so many different areas of our lives. And so, right now, again, with the presidential election coming up, I just find so many people like, oh, if you vote for this person, like I can't talk to you. And I've been a part of that camp at some point. Like there was a point where I think our whole family was. And now it's like, okay, well, a couple years have gone by and, there are some things that have come out and surfaced since the last presidential election. And I think we're leaning more towards, maybe we're maturing, right? We're leaning more towards like, well, there are some healthy discussions and debates that we've been having with people that we don't necessarily agree with, but can you try on alternate perspectives? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pull a statement that you do sometimes, or it's not a statement. It's a question.
I feel attacked already.
You have to give me credit that I'm actually pretty good at this.
Okay.
Like I love talking to people who share different opinions, especially when it comes to politics.
Yeah, but you have a friend group and all you do is you look forward to debating and winning.
No.
I'm your wife, so I know you. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, but like John, if you're listening, like any of your friends, like
they want to win too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's what we're going to be talking about today, how not to try to win a debate.
But I think it depends on, the circle of friends that you have, the group that you have, if that's the type of relationship that you have.
And that's what I think is important for you.
But the big thing I think that is the problem, and this is a public service announcement to everyone listening and spread the news. We do not have dialogue and we do not have debate, right? As citizens. Now, do we have people who go on television and have debates? Yes. But it doesn't happen often.
Those are so toxic and dysfunctional most of the time, though.
Most of the time, but really good ones are great to watch. When you watch two people who have really in-depth knowledge about a very specific topic, whether it be religion, whether it be politics, or whatever the topic is, but to have that conversation is great because you pull something from both perspectives and it usually shapes you to be a little bit more well-rounded. And so we wanted to have this because I think that when it comes to really being a person that I think many people want to say that they're open-minded, that they actually have a great perspective on life. You cannot have a great perspective if you don't understand the other perspectives.
Right.
So I just want to put that out there as like
Unless
the
you
premise.
think your perspective is right all the
But
time.
even if you think your perspective is right, you can only get there if you try it on the other ones first.
Well, that's the kind of the point of today is
Right.
like everyone like vehemently thinks that like I am 100% right.
Right.
Like my perspective's right. That's the point of debating or arguing is that you're debating what you believe to be true.
Right.
And so we just wanted to kind of talk today about some recent, like we were in the car not too long ago. Remember, we were on a long drive and we were listening to the All In podcast. And who was on the podcast that we were listening to?
It was Tucker Carlson.
Right. Which, you know, not a big fan of. And so we kind of forced ourselves to listen to it, which we do often. Like, you know, we're not big Fox News people, but every now and then we turn it on just to kind of hear the different perspective. And so we have some family members, which shall remain anonymous. They only lean in one direction. And so we're constantly challenging them. Well, why don't you flip the channel sometimes and watch it? Not from a perspective of like, oh, screw them, but from a perspective of maybe you could learn something about the other side of the argument. And I really think that that's like what needs to happen right now with like the whole Israel and Palestine thing, right? Like so many people are like expecting you to pick a side, and it's to the point where it's so toxic. You can't even have a talk about it, a debate about it. And
because you get slapped with the label.
Right.
Either way.
I mean, I saw Jay Shetty post something the other day on Instagram. I'm just gonna say, I think Instagram's toxic, by the way. But I saw Jay Shetty post something about like a conversation he had with his wife. And in the comments, one of the first comments I read, and has he stood up for Palestine?
Oh.
And so someone in the comments is like, oh, why must he stand up for Palestine?
Right.
Like, because he's brown and you think he's from that region or something?
Right.
And so, you know, not everyone has to take a stand. Like maybe he has Jewish friends. Maybe he's got Palestinian friends. Like he doesn't want to publicly take a stance because maybe he's just focused on researching and trying to support the friend groups that he has, which honestly, that's the camp I'm in. Like, how can I support you in the group that you're in? Because I'm just one person. I can't change it. Right.
Yeah. And I think that if you look at situations like that, in when people take a stand, right, and then people disagree with those stands, we label them in our society and we banish them or we cancel them. And typically what I have found is that people arrive at a certain perspective because they have a certain amount of information that you may not necessarily have. Or maybe you have that information and within that information, you still feel a certain way. And that's perfectly fine.
Right.
But the fact that we don't explore with curiosity of how did you get there?
Yep.
How did you get to that perspective? And we slap that label on, then we've squashed our ability to actually learn from the situation. So when we were listening to the All In podcast and we were listening to Tucker Carlson, there were many times we paused and we said,
we had such great debate.
Right. And we started having dialogue because we were like, now the way that was put, I understand how he arrived there. We may not agree, but we definitely understand how he arrived there. And this was in a different form than what we were normally seeing Tucker Carlson, which is on Fox, and he's giving like hard hitting because he's trying to get views, right? And
it's
so
polarizing.
It's polarizing, and it's not a lot of context, and it's speaking to a specific audience that wants to hear that specific version in that way, right.
And that conversation, like one thing we talked about a lot was like he said, and this is a white guy saying we have to stop talking about racism, which is so triggering for people, right? The context that he gave, though, was he was like referencing books and historical events of anytime you want to create unity, you have to first stop talking about the things that differentiate you.
Right.
We were like,
he was saying you de-emphasize the differences that you have and you emphasize the common ground, which I thought was
so finding more commonality helps us move every party's agenda forward versus only focusing on the differences, right? And we were like, God, that's such an interesting, good way to put it. You never really thought about it. Like if you hear a white guy say, we got to stop talking about racism. Yeah, because you're the oppressor, right? And that's where the conversation usually goes. But it was a really interesting conversation that we paused several times. and had amazing dialogue. And so then today, what really sparked and solidified this conversation and the title and the topic was there was a recent interview with Candace Owens on the Bill Maher show.
Yeah, so Bill Maher has this, it's not his normal real time. It's his Club Random. That's the name of the show, Club Random with Bill Maher. And so this is kind of like a more relaxed version of Bill Maher. And if you know who Bill Maher is, he is very outspoken. He's a comedian. He's had a show on HBO for, at least 2 decades.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
But he's a political comedian.
And he's a political comedian, and he is, very liberal, right? And to see him have Candace Owens on, who, if you don't know Candace Owens is, she really kind of came to fame in a lot of that time during the 2020, and when we were having a lot of Black Lives Matter things, and she was very outspoken on a conservative perspective that made her very polarizing.
So she's a Black 34-year-old Black American conservative political commentator, and she apparently now has her own show.
Yeah.
And so Bill Maher has her on. By the way, I'm sure that so much of his content and jokes were around Candace Owens. At some point, right?
Yeah.
And so to see them on the show together, we were like, oh gosh, this is so interesting. And so we sat down, we watched it. And it was really interesting because there were some topics they argued about in a respectful way. Like, oh, come on, you can't possibly believe that.
Right,
what about this? And they were fact checking each other and then like saying, okay, I stand corrected, right? You're right. But still, this is how I got to this point. This is why I feel this way. Okay, well, this is my perspective.
Right.
And ultimately, it was extremely healthy.
Yeah.
And very insightful to watch as, viewers. And then we just started talking about how like this is what's missing. Like I think in America, in households, in, multi-generations, like we can't communicate with each other because we don't want to have dialogue. We just want to debate.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, well, we can agree to disagree. Do you know where that phrase came from, by the way?
No.
So it says, in 1770, which is a long damn time ago, the phrase agree to disagree appeared in print in its modern meaning when the death of George Whitefield, John Wesley, a memorial sermon, whatever, acknowledged but downplayed the two men's doctrinal differences. So it was just a phrase that someone said that they coined in 1770.
So interesting.
Right. And so, well, we can agree to disagree. That's a way to shut it down.
But yeah, and so I want people to know too that we're not saying agree to disagree to shut down the conversation, because I think that when people hear that, it's they weaponize it. They're like, well, we're just going to agree to disagree, right? And it's this with this attitude that I am not willing to tolerate your perspective any longer,
right?
And so we're just going to end the conversation. What we're saying agree to disagree is that when we watched, Candace Owens and Bill Maher talk, they were enjoying the conversation while they were disagreeing.
Right.
And I think that to me, when you think
is
about
the definition of agree to disagree.
That's the definition of agree to disagree, but it's also an exercise of intellectual honesty, right?
For sure.
And I think that there are times where we have to be more intellectually honest and say, hey, I understand you arrived at this perspective by some version of your experience that you pulled from, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, the phrase acknowledges like that both parties are unlikely to change their views and suggests that they should just respect each other's opinions.
Yeah.
And so we're here for it, but also like if you're just shutting down things in life with other people. So maybe you're like, well, I'm not being interviewed, for anything political. I try to stay away from political debates. I don't even talk to people. That's really what we're talking about today.
Right.
So why are you, because you're always saying like, this is what's wrong with people and politics.
Right.
Like we don't talk about politics. We should be talking about politics and how they impact people, but it should be in a respectful way that helps move the conversation forward and stimulate like different opinions and thoughts.
I think, and so this is going to be, I'm going to pass judgment. I think it's extremely immature to not talk about something as important as politics, even when it may be triggering for someone, or you may talk about something they firmly disagree with. I just think that that's what children do. Children avoid conversations because
Not a lot of adults would do that.
huh?
A lot of adults do that.
No, I'm saying that's why it's
Yeah.
immature,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like like to say we don't talk about politics, it's
Yeah.
like so I have what you're saying is this, is I have my opinions and my values. I don't want to share them with you.
Mm-hmm.
They're never going to change.
I believe
And
what I
I'm
believe.
right. But what you're also saying is I'm a person that is not open-minded because I don't want to hear your perspective. That's why I'm
Mm-hmm.
not telling you mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not willing to grow or evolve and change based on new information, based on new standings and things that may happen in the world. That is downright silly,
Yeah.
right? I think smart people who say that don't realize how dumb it sounds.
Yeah. So let me ask you, when was the last conversation that you had where you disagreed with someone, but it was a dialogue versus a debate?
So
I know the answer to this.
what
It's a quiz. Just kidding.
you-
The other night you came home and
Mhm.
you were on a phone call with your friend Brandon.
Oh yes.
And you guys started somehow talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
And I was like, he should not come for my husband
Right,
when it comes to
right.
the Bible. And I was waiting so bad. I wanted so badly to send Brandon a text and be like, don't fall into this trap. Eddie's waiting to debate with you. And you enjoy that, right?
Yeah, I think talking
healthy.
about religion and talking about the history of religion is important, and I
Mhm.
think I feel the exact same way about that as I think about politics. I understand there's a layer of faith that goes into spirituality and religion, but talking about it and talking about different aspects of it is important. And so
Mhm.
we got into this conversation and we debated for I think it was about 2 hours
Yeah.
at least.
It
And
cut into my nighttime routine.
But I know. But one of the things I think I know for a fact is that we're still going to be best friends,
Mhm.
right? Well, you're my best friend, and he's my other
Yeah.
best friend.
Okay. Watch yourself.
I know, but we're still going to be good friends.
Yeah.
It's like it has nothing to do with our
Do
relationship.
you think it's a guy thing? Like you?
I think guys, from what I have seen,
Yeah.
based on my own experience,
Mhm.
I think guys tend to be able to handle that more than what I've seen from women. I think women get really firm into that, whatever their belief system is and value system. And politics for women, I think, have a little bit more
Emotional pull.
It's emotional pull. There's intimacy to that
Mhm.
because a lot of times it has to do with their bodies.
Mhm.
It has to do with their freedoms,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that there's a little bit more to that. So I understand that, and I understand that that's also something that as a man, I don't have to deal with.
Right. I think maybe, and I would love for the audience to kind of like chime in on this. I feel like maybe women's emotions can get the best of us sometimes, and it's like, girl, are you arguing with me about this? And then it doesn't allow for. I mean, I have great debates with my girlfriends. We have good conversations about lots of things, but I think when we have conversations, it's mostly like we're learning from each other and like
But you guys don't
sharing
touch
things. But
on,
we don't.
like,
Yeah,
controversial topics.
no. I mean, most of my friends, we kind of believe the same things. Like no one's going to out of left field be like, oh yeah, I'm so glad, Roe versus Wade was overturned. Like
Right.
no one's going to say that. That would be like, girl, what? Like we're all mothers of daughters. And I'm talking about my good friends that I've grown up with, but I do have friends, business acquaintances and like other friends from different groups that like they're super religious, not really my thing, but I don't knock it,
Right.
know. And I can come to your church event, but there's boundaries
Right.
and so yeah, I do have friends of different walks of life is what I'm saying, and there are things that they agree with that I don't, but I wouldn't say we get into big debates, especially like I'm not going to get into a debate with one of my super religious friends about abortion. I'm just not going to talk about that.
Why not?
Because they believe what they believe the Bible to say. And I'm not going to, like, you like to cite chapter and verse. I'm not well versed on the Bible like that.
Right.
But I believe what I believe based on my experience, based on research that I've done about women's health, based on the fact that I'm a mother of daughters. And I just believe in freedom of choice.
Right.
And so if one of my super religious church friends thinks that it's murdering babies and Jesus doesn't want you to do that, there's nothing I can say to debate that.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would ask is that, like, okay, well, I respect your opinion it's based on your beliefs. And I need you to respect my opinion and what I teach my children, right? And there wouldn't be really a debate about that.
Right. Do you think that you know how they got there? Because I say that because, it's a sensitive topic, and it's one of those things that I think people want to preserve their relationship, so they avoid it, right? But it's interesting to find out how they got there. Like, I'm always so interested, like, how did you get to that thought
Well, they get there, you know
belief?
why.
Right.
Like, you grew up in a certain religion, you went to church every Sunday, you were baptized, whatever, right? Baptized, christened, whatever. And you've carried those beliefs as an adult, I believe, in some cases, without challenging them or revisiting them. And that's just what you believe.
Right.
A lot of people do that with politics too.
Right.
Like, your family was Republican, you were raised in a Republican household, and so now you vote Republican.
Right.
I think a lot of the friends that we have that are, that pride themselves in research and emotional intelligence and, like personal development and growth, I've seen a lot of them change parties and they have different reasons. And then I've seen a lot of parents be really upset about that.
Right.
And I think that's a lack of emotional intelligence or emotional maturity to think that whatever you raised your kid to believe, they're supposed to believe that for the rest of their lives.
Right.
We have the biggest debates with our daughters all the time. And I would just say, like, we're a household of debaters. I don't think that it gets heated and people want to rip each other's heads off, but I think we're always trying to get them to understand different perspectives and vice versa. And I mean, we've debated everything.
Right.
When the R. Kelly stuff was out, we were debating if one of our daughters said, if the girl is not 18, she cannot consent. And I was like, okay, well, have you not been in high school and been attracted to someone who was a little bit older? Nope, she can't. She cannot. She does legally, she can't consent. So she has no voice. I'm like, it doesn't really work like that in the real world. Right. Yeah. And then they think well, we're older and that used to fly back then, but it doesn't now. And so, there's just a lot of debates that we've had.
Yeah. One of the things I think about is for most people, us included, you come to a belief system. Usually the majority of what you know is absent of other beliefs, meaning that when I learned, my mom took me to church, and so I was born and raised in church. We started in a Baptist church, then we went to a Christian church, right? So when I look back at my childhood, and I had my own personal Bible, I still own that Bible now, it's highlighted, all that stuff, right? But I came to that belief system because of what was passed down to me. But it was also, I came to that belief systems with the absence of other known belief systems. I did not know there was Buddhism. I did not know that there was Islam. I did not know that there were other options of faiths out there that I can choose from. And that goes for everything, right? And so that is how you politically, all those things are usually an absence of other information and knowledge out there. And so I think that what I find is that the more knowledge I have, the more my value system and belief system changes and evolves, because new information gives me different grounding and different perspectives. Right. But if you think about it, that's crazy. We have these belief systems, but we're creating them or have them with the absence of more knowledge than we actually have ourselves.
Yeah. So can you think of a couple of things? Because I'll give you some topics and then you tell me if an argument or a debate has come up where someone may have learned something from their parents or when they were a kid that they still believe to be true, but it's not necessarily true, right? So for an example, because we've touched on religion, we've touched on politics, but let's take health, for example, right?
I thought you were going to say Santa Claus.
No, but do you know, Santa Claus, that's a great debate. Do you give credit to, the fat guy that comes down the chimney, or do you say, no, my damn name's going on all those presents because I want my kids to thank me?
I wasn't even thinking about it from that standpoint. I was thinking,
is Santa real?
You grow up thinking Santa's real, and you get more information. All of a sudden, Santa's not real anymore.
Oh gosh, right? Santa is real, boys and girls.
I know, but sorry if you're listening to this and you have children, you're bad.
Yeah. Jordan asked Siri when she was 6.
Exactly.
Right. But she had more information.
She had more information.
Changed her perspective.
So she changed her perspective.
Yeah.
And, I know the girls knew for a while, but it was in their best interest to go with the lie. Yeah, I know I was going with it. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
Santa's still there.
Was it
Just
Jasmine? She was like,
still
oh
works
yeah, I
for
want
me.
a laptop. What?
Right.
You're 10. Oh, you guys can't afford it? I'll just ask Santa.
But how many people have like beliefs like that they
Right.
keep because it's convenient?
Okay, well, let's talk about
So-
this. Health.
Okay.
Have you or have you not? I feel like we're on a game show. Heard someone say something about health that maybe was told to them when they were younger that's not really true.
Yes.
Okay, what is it? It's probably the same as mine.
If it's cold outside, you can catch a cold.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, not true.
not
Whoever
true.
said that lied. They just
Yeah.
want you to put a sweater
Well, there's
on.
a million things your parents told you that were not like
I
the
know.
dome light. Driving in the car at
Oh.
night with the dome light on is illegal. You'll get a ticket. Who started that? Like it
Right.
was like our parents' generation.
And we
that
passed
told
it
us
on to
that.
the kids.
Oh yeah, and they were
called
like,
us
you know,
out.
that's not real. I'm like, what do you mean it's not real? We Google it. It's definitely not illegal. So now I think just for fun, I just drive around with the dome light on sometimes. But health issues, like, you know, a friend of mine recently was like, well, you know, I come from a big family, so we're just big. It's genetic. And I was like, it's not genetic.
No.
You genetically eat exactly what you were raised to eat.
Right,
You have the
right.
same recipes. You have the same eating habits. You have the same exercise habits. And so that's not genetic. That's a
nurtured.
learned behavior that's
Right.
been nurtured. Right?
Right.
So we had a whole conversation about that. And she was like, interesting. Like, I'll have to look that up. I was like, please do. Like, not in
You'll
a
be
way,
surprised.
not in a condescending way, but I'm like, girl, you've been walking around your whole life thinking because my family's big, then I have to be big. It's not true.
But that's that's a small topic that
Mhm.
probably doesn't have a lot of angst to talk about.
Right.
But the unlock that she walks away with is tremendous.
Yeah.
Right. Just by having that
Right.
conversation.
Here's another one.
Yeah.
Family issues. Had a great debate the other day with one of my family members. And I was, arguing and debating a perspective that was not being received. And I was like, okay, well, just because we've done it, so many years for this way doesn't mean that it can't be changed. Like I tried every which way to just like slide in an alternate perspective, wasn't working. Got off the phone, and about 10 minutes later, I get a text. You know what? I think you're right. Let's go ahead and, do what you said to do, because after thinking about, I was like, okay, that's nice. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's someone in my family, I'd say, that is the most open-minded, like comes across kind of like, this is my perspective, my point, but then always listens and tries it on. And in time, they come around. Who is that?
Mr. Craig Cohen.
My dad.
Yeah.
Always. He likes a good debate.
Yeah.
So that's healthy for us.
And that's one of the things I really enjoy about him is that we can talk about anything. No, nothing's off limits. Sometimes he may get annoyed. I've had time he goes, all right, that's enough, son. All right,
then he
bye.
wakes up in the morning and he's like, I thought about it, and that's a good perspective.
He has like epiphany dreams.
Yeah, I love him.
I thought you were gonna say. When you said family issues, I was like, if you say that because there was trauma with your grandmother and you were
Kourtney Kardashian,
and you were an egg in her body, and that trauma went to your egg, and then the trauma.
Can we
went
run
to
that clip? I mean,
just like,
Kourtney Kardashian on the Kardashians the other night. Like, I was like, am I high or is this happening? Like, what? She was like, did you know that if your ancestors had trauma, they pass it down generation after generation and it becomes your trauma? And Chloe's like, yeah, I rebuke that. Like, and she goes, so
like True has eggs in her body right now. She had them in her when she was in your body. She had eggs in her body.
Okay.
She was inside of you when you were inside of mom.
Ew.
So wait, you mean, she goes, no, Chloe, it's like real. It's science. Like it was passed in the womb.
Like MJ's trauma.
Okay.
And Nana's trauma.
What?
Was like inside of me and you, because it was inside of mom.
Okay.
Because mom was in their body.
All of your
I'm
trauma,
gonna have to research that.
Mom's trauma, this and that. She goes, so you're telling me that I put my trauma in my fetus and True has it now? Like, it was so funny. And I was like, no, this is not accurate data. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that would tell you that that is true, but I don't know how I feel about that. And like family topics like parenting styles, big one, you know. Well, I used to get spanked and this and that. And I got to tell you, I've had to change my parenting views many times over the years as a parent.
Right.
But yeah, I think there should be consequences for kids, right? Those
Right.
look different. Those are debatable.
Right.
Another topic though that people can't seem to like really talk about is like death and grief. I remember like asking, you know, I don't know if it was my grandma, someone like, hey, just out of curiosity, do you have your like affairs in order? And someone was like, that's offensive. Bitch, it's not. We're all gonna die, and we all need to make sure.
Someone said it was offensive.
Yeah, we won't get into that,
Okay.
but like that's
Sorry.
one of the topics that gets people all worked up. Oh, you're not supposed to talk about it. It's taboo.
Right.
Well, no, we need to talk about it, right? And then here's a good, interesting kind of sidebar. What in the world when it comes to death and grief? Let's say that we're married, and we are, but let's say that one of us dies. I'll die, and you bury me.
Not fair. Okay.
You bury me, which I don't want to be buried. And when you pay for the plot, you also pay for your plot because you're going to go on top of me when you die, right? And so now you meet another woman, which you can't because I'll come back for you. Just kidding. So you meet another woman, you fall in love with her, and now she wants you to be buried with her.
Okay.
Well, you've already committed to my plot. This is a true story. Like one of my girlfriends was telling me that this is like a big issue now. So like our daughters are like, Dad, when you die, you're not going to be with mom.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I have this new wife and she actually for Christmas bought me a plot and she wants me to be buried with her. What do you do? Like we need to discuss these things. These are things that like, you know,
I think we're gonna have a polygamous gravesite. It's gonna be like
okay. Oh my
three
God.
stacked on top,
and all the kids are like, I don't want to be buried near them. I don't want to go visit him when you die. I'm never going to your gravesite. So it's like a big issue for this family right now. Thank God it's not our
just get
family.
cremated and you avoid the whole thing.
Right.
Okay.
Then everybody could have a little bit of you.
Uh-huh.
The next topic is like social issues, obviously like racism. There's a big issue around Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd thing in 2020, which is when Candace Owens kind of blew up, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, trans rights. There's so many things. I mean, you had a debate the other day with someone about that, right? Like the trans rights around like, oh, people are just going to come into the bathroom and like, you know.
Yeah. And so I was talking to someone and we were having a really good dialogue and debate. And they brought up this concern around, you know, like trans people going into bathrooms and stuff like that. And I asked them, I said, well, name a situation where something went wrong. They couldn't.
Right.
I said,
has that ever happened to you?
Has it ever happened to you? Have you ever seen it?
Right.
And so this goes to this thing that it's a non-issue for the majority of the world, but we polarize and we make it an issue because we, you know, in a lot of cases we weaponize it for political reasons and all those kind of things. And so it was just an interesting conversation to say like you're worried about something that, you know, there's no record of someone saying, oh, this has been a problem, right? So, but that is one of those things where, it's good to have a conversation because I think that person probably walked away going, oh yeah, it's not really a big part of my life.
Like why am I so worried about this then? If it's never happened to me, it's never happened to anyone that I know, it's not a big issue. Oh, maybe the media has made it a big issue. And that was your argument. Like, are you fearful of something that maybe the media has made an issue out of and now you're like spreading it? Like that's part of the propaganda.
Yeah, and I want to make sure like it wasn't about changing his perspective on trans rights and all those kind of things. It was really about like, you know, here's a perspective like this is a
Did
really
you
a
think
non-issue.
this through?
And so
it was a good conversation. Another category is like career and job performance. People definitely get like weird about like discussing salaries. Or, you know, struggles in the workplace, conflicts, dissatisfaction with their career. There's a huge debate on like professionalism in the workplace. You know, are tattoos acceptable? Well, I hope so because we're covered in tattoos, but you know, those are big debates. And then one that I think is huge is personal life choices, like conversations about lifestyle choices. Maybe you want to be child free. You know, women that decide that they don't want to have children, like, why is it up for debate with other people that shame them? Like, just listen to why she doesn't want to have kids. And can't you try on the perspective that, no, she's not going to be old and miserable and regretting her decision of not having kids. Just because you love your kids doesn't
Right.
mean that she has to have kids.
100%.
That one drives me nuts. Marriages,
Right.
like marital status, like some people don't need to be married. They
Right.
don't like the idea of, like, what is the word? I don't want to say arranged marriage,
Right.
but like, the
Commitment matrimony.
something like
something
that.
like
Yeah.
But I think the big thing too is that, like, however you come out on any of these things,
Mhm.
like, it doesn't mean that you cancel that person. Like,
Right.
are not friends with, just because my friend has this issue when it comes to, trans right, I'm not going to defriend him because
Right.
of his belief system. I'm hoping that through our conversations and our friendship, there's an opportunity to influence. And if there isn't, then that's so be it. There
Yeah.
are other things that we can talk about. There are other things that we can continue to talk about that
Mhm.
and have debate and whatever it is. But I think it's like, it's kind of crazy that, like, everything, all these topics that you are talking about, however you come out on that dictates who's your friends.
Right.
Right.
You might not have any.
You may have right. You may not
Because you're
have any.
100% right in everything.
Right, but you refuse to be friends with people who
Right.
think about anything different.
And that's the issue, is like, we've heard so many people like, oh, I would never work for that person because, they vote for Trump. Okay. Well, that may not be my candidate or your candidate of choice, but also, like, are they a terrible person?
Right.
Have you ever had a conversation about why? So that's the point of this podcast. What are some things that we can do? Because we've kind of gone over a bunch of different scenarios where you might need to have dialogue instead of debate, or instead of, just kind of agree to disagree.
Yeah. And so we want to challenge you to take these 10 things and, like, find someone that disagrees
Mhm.
with you, or you disagree with them, and just open up a dialogue. And so I think the first thing is, in order for anything to transpire in this process of trying to connect with people who you normally disagree with, you gotta have active listening. It's like
Mhm.
the foundation of understanding. And I think listening with care shows other people that their perspective about the world matters and it has merit.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number
Love it.
two is empathy. You have to see other people's perspective, try it on, and you do that by using curiosity to better understand how they arrived at this opinion or this
Mhm.
value system or belief.
Okay.
And sometimes, like, you've been reading a lot of memoirs, sometimes you read someone's story and you go, I get it.
Right.
I see how they got there.
Mhm.
I probably would have got there too.
Right.
Right. And so that is an important thing to really think about. The other part is self-regulation. And
Is
so
that
this
3?
is number 3,
Mhm.
self-regulation. And so this is the emotional intelligence piece. This is managing your emotions, because
Not getting all damn worked up.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Anticipate that if you're going to talk about something, you're going to get triggered, and you have to find ways to subdue your emotions. Somehow.
Triggered, when people say I'm so triggered by that, it's not like a green light for you to say my switch is flipped and now I'm going to lose
Right.
my mind. It's like, your job is to identify what your triggers are,
Right.
and also prepare to self-regulate when you identify that something has been triggered, right?
Right.
So if someone talks about, anything like abusing children, trigger for me,
Mhm.
right? But I'm not going to lose my shit on you. I'm just
Right.
going to be like, okay, I have to emotionally regulate myself right now and see and understand and, like, take it in. And so you got to identify what triggers you have.
Yeah, and right now you see, for most people who did not vote for Trump, when you see a red hat, immediately you go, "What does it say on there?"
Mhm.
Right? Because people get triggered by
Yeah.
it, right? And so, like, you got to manage that, because I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 is open communication. So what that means is expressing your feelings effectively, and effectively is the key word. Explain how you feel about the perspective without using words that damages the respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you can say, hey, I got to tell you, just as an example, when I see Make the World, what is it?
Make the world a better place?
No, like, what is that
For
slogan?
you and for me and the entire human race.
Oh, Make America Great
Oh,
Again.
MAGA.
Right? Yeah, Make America Great Again. Like, you have to tell people, I got to tell you that it feels like you're trying to take us back to a place where
Yeah.
me as a black man, I wasn't in a really good spot.
Right.
Right. So, I didn't have a lot of rights,
Uh-huh.
or are you talking about that point in time
Right.
in America? And
Right.
so
What?
I think that saying that open communication to someone who firmly believes they want to make America great again gives them a perspective to go, oh, I want to tell you, that's not what I'm talking
that's
about.
not, yeah.
Right. And so it just kind of gives them that place of saying, oh, I just want to make sure we are open about that's how I feel about it. You can tell me how you feel about it or what your intentions are by representing it.
Got it.
Number 5 is respectful disagreement. So agreeing to disagree, right? Like we talked about, but be vocal, I think, with non-starters, right? And I think the goal is not to have non-starters, but I think you have to tell people, hey, I'm going to tell you, like, this thing here, I'm not going to move on because, and explain how you got there and what it is.
I've done research. I've got a PhD in this. I wrote a thesis on this. Like, there's really nothing you can tell me that would sway me.
Or sway me, or there's a perspective around this that I just think that, I can't move off of right now. But let's talk about our common ground so that we can, talk about. And then I think the best way to say is, I know the non-starter for you is your religion, your faith. And so we won't go there. Or so whatever that may be, I think you have to vocalize that. Number 6 is self-reflection. Understand your role in the conflict. This is an opportunity for you to exercise deep awareness that you yourself have come to perspective or an opinion based on your own experiences. And so I think that and that kind of leads into like the empathy, but I know I got here because I was born here. I was taught this.
Yeah.
This is what my experience is. That person has a totally different experience in how they got there. And I think that requires respect.
I think that's one of the most important, though, is like to understand you have a perspective based on your experiences in the world.
Right.
Period. Like I think the world is generally a good place. I think people are generally good people based on my experience and the way that I view the world. Are there bad things that happen? Yes. But do I think the world is a scary place to live? Not necessarily, because most days I get to walk down the street and, and obviously that depends where you're raised and all that stuff, where you live. But for the most part, like people put on these like beliefs, but you fail to realize like it's because of your experience.
Yeah. And I think I always have to remind myself, because I feel like I could be really charged by like, this is the stuff I've been studying this. I know this stuff, but also keep in mind the map is not the territory. And what that means is that even your perspective is simply a map of your interpretation of something, but not the actual reality. Right. And so I think that that's the thing that you have to make sure you keep in mind.
Yep.
Number 7 is patience, giving time and space when needed. Sometimes gaining understanding or even influencing someone can take time and nurturing the relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
Number 8 is apologize and forgiveness, healing and moving forward. You're human. You're going to say something that offends someone at some point in the relationship or in the conversation. And so you have to be ready to forgive, and you also have to be ready to get grace. And so you may have a conversation with someone for the first time about politics, religion, whatever it is that's a hot topic for you, and they may not know how to communicate it in a really effective way. And so you have to be ready to give them grace.
Well, you could share this push podcast with them.
100%. Number 9, which I think is to me number 1, humor. Lighten the mood.
Yeah.
One of the most important things we can do is make light of our differences. It's what we love comedians for, right?
My stepmom, Robin, that's like her go-to. Like when I became a parent, she said, just always remember to infuse humor.
Yeah.
And she's like, why do you think I used to tell like the kids, oh, well, you're definitely not my favorite today, or like, I remember my brother Jared, no fair, she gets to do that. And she's like, well, obviously she's my favorite. That's why I'm letting her. Like just always finding a way to like, you're just find humor in it,
I love that. And the last one, which is very similar to what we're doing, is support networks, leaning on other people's perspectives. So we hope that this podcast gives you a perspective that opens you up to have dialogue that you normally would not have. and don't be afraid to ask people about your perspective, to check your thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a thing that I don't think a lot of people do. I want to do more often, is to say, here's how I'm thinking about this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I thinking about this right? What am I missing? What's the perspective you have? Are you seeing it very similar to this? And that could be not necessarily with the person that you may not be agreeing with, that you have a relationship. It would be with someone else to check. You're like, hey, this is what this person said. What do you think? And I think that could be really effective.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I guess the thing is that we want to leave our listeners with like a challenge, like reflect on your daily conversations. How often do you find yourself trying to win an argument rather than, understand? And so we have a thing that we say that it's like, don't fight to be right, fight to get it right.
Right.
And if you're trying to get it right, I think that eliminates a lot of the like you yelling and trying to push your perspective down someone's throat. You just like, we're trying to get it right here. What is right, know? And that comes from open dialogue and like good communication. And then just like, can you recall a time, I'm asking you this question,
Me?
Edward.
Okay.
Can you recall a time when some sort of dialogue with a friend, a coworker, something opened your mind to a new perspective? I feel like for me, the answer to that is every one of these books opens my mind to some sort of new perspective. And I think books give you the language that maybe sometimes you don't have to put the perspective into words that make sense, that just shifts everything for you.
Yeah.
So what's yours?
I agree. I think you said someone I worked with.
Yeah. Let's say a coworker or a friend, family member.
Yeah.
Like,
I think I can't remember a specific time, but I would say collectively what I have learned just being in leadership is that I think I used to think that people just didn't care. And I think that at some point they get to a place of indifference. But what I found is that majority of people want to do well. They want to do good work. They want to show up really well. At some point, they got lost.
yeah.
Right. And so I think that perspective over time, I've come to that perspective. I did not always believe that.
Yeah.
So
I love that. So I hope this episode was helpful in helping you have better dialogue or debates in a respectful way.
yeah.
And, I think that the categories that we mentioned earlier, it's really good to like go back and ask yourself, like, do I hold perspectives that are uniquely mine because of my experiences? And can I still hold these perspectives if I think they're true, but also try on another perspective that might belong to someone else? It's like an outfit. Like, just try it on. It might not fit. That's okay. Try it on.
Have conversations with people that you disagree with, but have a relationship with them as well.
Yeah.
Don't cast people away because they believe something different. Read books that you know by the cover, by the description, that you would disagree with. Listen to podcasts that you like. I think that those things, you want to immerse yourself with those things, so that it just makes you a more well-rounded person.
Yes. So if this episode was helpful, please take a couple minutes to share it with some friends.
And subscribe, yo.
Yeah, definitely subscribe to the Push Podcast, but share it with some friends, because I think that if you're like us in 2024 and every other year, we want to have meaningful relationships, that you have deep conversations, and I think those create really amazing connections. And so as we get older, those are things that are really important to us. And so we're just going to challenge you guys. Find some friends that you disagree with, spark some challenging debates. And I think it's just good conversation starters. So share this with a friend. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Push through.